Awesome, looks like we're good to go. So if anyone's joining from the recording, welcome. This is the first Hub Retro. And in this call, we are going to be covering the context of the upgrade. We are going to be having a retro session, which Denise and Lexa from Haifa's Worker Co-op will lead in order to gather some of your feedback about the retro in an interactive format. After that, we'll have a validator question and answer session with Dante and Millen. And then Jahan will bring us back to an upgrade pipeline and some potential future upgrades as well, because we'd like to solicit your feedback about that. The final point will be, we'd love your feedback about the call itself to see how we're doing and see how we can further improve these calls in the future. And lastly, we'll close out and continue on with our day. So with that, Jahan, I will pass it over to you for any context about the upgrade itself, the upgrade from May 8th, which was an emergency upgrade.
Yeah, so the upgrade on May 8th, there were several different things going on. And so it's, there was these, there was first of all an issue on the hub where if somebody created a million junk denoms, they could cause a DOS by basically putting them all into distribution, which would mean that anybody using any staking functionality would basically run out of gas whenever they tried to do anything. And I think actually we tested, and I think it was worse. I think it was actually just halting the chain. That was one thing. DOS vulnerabilities aren't necessarily, warranting an emergency upgrade because it's there's no money to be lost, and it's also unlikely that they're exploited. But we do want to deal with it in a relatively timely manner. And then there was also this thing with the multi-sigs. So people were not able to use the assigned consumer key transaction from multi-sigs or ledger devices because of some amino stuff, which is amino is this old serialization format, but it's still used by multi-sigs and ledgers. Apparently, it can't be gotten rid of. And so we started hearing about that. A couple weeks before the upgrade, as people were unable to submit those transactions. And so we wanted to get the upgrade in before Neutron started, because we didn't want a situation where Neutron started running, but then there were validators who were still not able to assign their keys and were then going to be jailed unfairly through no fault of their own, just because the transaction didn't work. So I think that the DOS is definitely adds some urgency. We may not have done an emergency upgrade just for the DOS thing. But with the multi-sig thing, we knew we really had to do something with that. And that kind of put the time pressure on. So we got the upgrade out, and everything seemed to have gone smoothly, but I guess you guys can give us feedback on that. One other thing I'll say, with the Neutron launch last week, what was interesting about it was that with the multi-sig thing, we were concerned that maybe a few validators would be affected by it and wouldn't be able to register their keys. That was kind of what we were thinking about, but what ended up actually happening was that a large number of validators were affected by it, so many that it was actually hard to get Neutron started. And so we had a lot of validators help us out by running Neutron for the initial period with their hub keys, if they hadn't been able to register their consumer key. And we're very grateful for that, and that allowed Neutron to start. And once Neutron was started, all the keys were able to be registered, and I think hopefully now we're on a normal footing with it. But I think that's it.
Awesome, thank you, Jahan. So we are going to have time for questions a little bit later in this call as well. You'll see once we start moving to this retro section, there will be a spot on our Miro board up top to add any questions to be addressed during the validator Q&A, or also followed up on later. So for now, this is a great introduction to actually jumping into the retro. And with that, Alice, could you please go ahead and share the link for the retro in the chat, and we will go ahead and share that screen to start getting some feedback here and jotting down those questions. So if everyone can go ahead and look in the chat, I'm going to switch my screen to another one. Please go ahead and open up that retrospective link and start. Yeah, with that, I'll pass it off to Denise and Lexa for an overview of what's going on next.
Awesome. Thanks, Abra. So I see that a lot more cursors have entered the Miro, which is great. A quick note on how this is going to work. If you've used Miro before, that's great. If you haven't, the UX is fairly straightforward. I would recommend grabbing a notepad from this stack and Command-C, Command-V, just copy paste the new one before you start writing it. Oops, okay, sorry, I don't know what I did here. So you'll see that there are three categories: continue, stop, and invent. Continue is what are the things that happened during the upgrade that we should continue to do for the next upgrade, or future coordinated activities. Stop are things that you observe that got in the way, made the upgrade less successful, or could have made the upgrade less successful. And invent are any ideas that you have right now on things that we could have done differently on the day or perhaps in the future. So these are the three categories. Feel free to add cards to any category during the sort of time we'll allow you to write. Please include your company name at the end of your comments. So the example ones here have hypha in brackets. This allows us to be able to follow up in case anyone writes something super interesting and we're like, ooh, we definitely want to hear more about that. We're not going to have enough time to talk about every single card. There's just too many people here. What else? Lexa and I will be moving cards around as you're writing them, so don't be surprised if you write a card and then it moves immediately. We're trying to cluster things that are similar. The way the next stage is going to work when we transition over to discussion is we're going to talk about the biggest clusters. So if you, for example, see someone from Strangelove write something that you agree with, write your thing anyway and put your company name on it anyway, because the size of the clusters is going to take priority in terms of how we do the discussion. Does that make sense? Any questions before we start the timer?
It does make sense. Thank you so much, Denise. And very quick, how long will everyone have to write down their thoughts here?
Yep, we are going to have 5 minutes, and the clock will start now. So 5 minutes to write anything in any category. I'll set a timer on my phone. I don't know, Barbara, if you have one separately anywhere.
Yep, I'll add one here for the Miro board. Everyone, please go ahead and get started. And I'm also going to be zooming in so the video can be clear. So I'm going to add a little bit of music to the Miro board and start the timer now. Let's do smooth groove. Okay. Yeah, Freak12, you definitely can submit your suggestions via chat. Do you mind helping Freak12 Techno just go ahead and transfer some of those into the Miro? Okay, so it looks like time is up.
Yes, if anyone is in the middle of writing a card, finish up in the next 10 seconds or so. But otherwise, it looks like we have some pretty good clusters. Okay, I think let's end with the on a positive note. So let's come back to the big cluster and then continue. But maybe let's start by digging in a little bit to the cluster around consumer key assignment clarity. So we've got comments here from Strangelove, Coinbase, and L5. Does anyone who wrote these cards or anyone who agrees with these cards want to expand beyond what's written here on what could have gone differently? Oh, I think people need to, if you want to speak, you have to request speaker, I think.
Okay, so we do have a comment. It says from Dubain, mic not working, that the biggest issue at Coinbase was not having clarity in when we needed to create our consumer chain key and the time window to do this before the genesis was created. So getting visibility into that time frame for next time would make a huge difference and let us come online sooner. Strangelove shares this sentiment as well from Nix. And Lavender5 shares it as well.
Yeah. What would be the right surface area for putting that information? I can think of a couple of places, but I'm curious to hear like what people were going to on the upgrade day before the upgrade day to understand like what's expected of them.
So it looks like Ian from Coinbase said being able to test that key assignment works before launch would be great, and crystal clear documentation would help as well. And I see Dan from Strangelove typing also. And clearly explain when the genesis will be final.
I can speak to the key assignment thing. You can assign keys as soon as the proposal is up. And you should definitely assign them before the spawn time is reached. So, ideally, if you want to avoid, if you don't want to do it while the proposal's up because maybe it won't pass. I think most proposals, Neutron did this, and I think future ones will as well, building in a little bit of time between the spawn time and the proposal passing. So doing it then would be fine, but also during the proposal works as well. And you can check if it worked. There's some query methods on the CLI, so you can check there if it worked. But yeah, we need to put that more clearly in documentation, which I think is the main point you're making.
Yeah, and then circling back to Denise's question as well. So as for the surface area of having some of these things, does anybody have any input into that? Like, where should that information live? How should it be communicated?
It might be a bit too verbose, but my first approximation would be to add like a blurb within the Gaia CLI when you're submitting that transaction, to say like this is what will happen if you submit this transaction at this point in time. But it's a lot of information to add to a CLI. Otherwise, it should have to go in like the Gaia repo probably.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yep,
And
and
the CLI.
yeah, Nick seconds that sentiment and says that you
Right.
can add more info in the CLI, maybe a dry run if it doesn't exist.
What would the dry run for key assignment? What would the dry run be doing? I guess if you can expand on that next.
Okay, Nick, you're on the stage. You should be good to speak.
Just unmute.
Sorry, I hate Discord. I'm not really trying to get, I'm diving too much into solutioning right now, but just if the CLI can, the spawn date seems very important. So if it could just, warn you or give you more information, it's just very difficult to know, like, okay, do I sign the consumer key before or after? What happens? We have to wait for these packets to come in if you assign it after. Because, like, I believe Coinbase shared the sentiment, but we were extremely nervous to have the same consumer key in two different deployments. We were protected by Horcrux because if the chain IDs don't match, Horcrux is not going to sign the transaction, but still makes me incredibly nervous.
Yeah, just I guess we probably don't want to get too sidetracked on this one thing, but yeah, if you assign, I guess the really important thing to keep in mind is if you do the key assignment transaction after the spawn time has been reached, then you will be considered to be using your provider key during the spawn time. So when the chain starts, it's going to be looking for your Cosmos Hub key, not the consumer key. And that's what happened with Neutron. And that's not really a problem for you, honestly, if the launch goes well. It's just a problem for the consumer chain if that happens to everybody, which is kind of what happened. We got to put in the docs too, and I think someone was suggesting like a diagram like with the phases or whatever. I think that's a really good idea. But I'm wondering, for right now, does that clear things up for you, or is there more details that you're still wondering about?
It would just be nice if the CLI would warn you, like, hey, it's after the spawn date. You're going to need to use your provider key for a while.
Got it. So, yeah. If in the case that you were trying to run,
any of those solutions, sound viable to you?
I'm trying to figure that out. I want to understand what he wants to do with the CLI, but if the so if you were trying to run a consumer chain with your provider key,
for a moment.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can hear you.
Oh, okay, cool. So Nix, if you were trying to run the consumer chain with your provider key, or just to let you know that the window had passed for doing your key assignment and having it like be reflected in the Genesis.
Yeah, I think, and others have illustrated this, but it was just really confusing to know, wait, do I do it before? Do I do it after? Am I doing it before or after? And like, what are the consequences of that?
Yeah, I guess, yeah, that's a good point. I guess the simple answer is to do it as soon as possible. There's no downside, so yeah.
Because we unfortunately were not able to do it before because our key custodian wasn't around.
Oh, got it. Yeah, in principle, as soon as the proposal goes up, you can do the key assignment and it will work. So that gives you 2 or 3 weeks.
Cool, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for expanding on that. Let's talk a little bit about the cluster in the stop category around lack of governance. So we have some comments, mostly from Strangelove, but I think the comment from Coinbase is actually pretty similar. Basically, changing Genesis without a gov proposal, state-breaking upgrades, and general review period. So let's dig into that a little bit. Does anyone have any further thoughts on what could have gone differently, how this could have gone a little bit better? What would you have preferred to see instead of what happened?
Okay, Ian, you are on the stage as well, and
Hi.
good to go.
People hear me?
Yes, we can hear
Yep.
you.
Yeah, cool. So a lot of our team is clustered on the West Coast, United States. So when we get the release at like, I think it was like 1 a.m. Pacific, and we need to have it ready for like a chain halt at 8 a.m., it makes it really difficult because we're put in a position where we're kind of monitoring, and then it's like, all right, I guess I'm going to try and just get up at 5 and then make sure everything works. And I think if you're a smaller team and you're running like 1 or 2 validators, you don't have a ton of setup, that's not a huge deal because you just swap binaries, no big deal. But we have a bunch of abstractions that let us run like thousands of them across different protocols. And that just means that it just takes more prep work for us to do upgrades. So I think at least having like, 48 hours or something like that. So we have a couple working days. That's very, very helpful because we were just like working on the weekend and that's not ideal.
Just kind of curious, would the information that there is an emergency upgrade coming, would that have been sufficient to start planning, or would you have needed more details about what was in the upgrade?
Yeah, so fortunately, I think by the time that the information was bubbled to us, we figured out like Friday, maybe 6 p.m., that there was an emergency upgrade. Obviously, it's an emergency, so that these things just happen. But obviously, that meant that someone had to kind of keep monitoring Discord over the weekend. And by the time that we actually had like the binary, it was, again, we had like single-digit hours left, and it just was like the middle of the night, so someone was awake working through that.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, ideally, like maybe you get 48 hours of heads up and it's during a weekday. I was pretty surprised that they decided to do the upgrade over the weekend. So perhaps in this example, if it was like Tuesday 8 a.m. launch rather than Monday 8 a.m. launch, and we had one business day to prepare, that would have made the lift a lot easier for us, and we could have like tested more things and had higher confidence.
Yeah. So it does. I think some of these questions. Yeah, the Monday thing was unfortunate. That was because Neutron was originally supposed to go live on Monday, so we wanted to fit with that schedule. And they delayed till Wednesday, so conceivably we could have done on Tuesday. But then they might have had delayed till Thursday. But yeah, unfortunate timing. The thing that I guess I'd want to get. I want to hear what you guys think about this, but it's. This upgrade, it was an emergency upgrade. It wasn't the most serious emergency ever, because there was no possibility to steal funds. If somebody had exploited the DOS vulnerability, it would have, they would have had to run a script to put a bunch of transactions in, but they could have done that. And once they did that, it would have like pretty much screwed up the state of the hub. And we could have saved that with an upgrade as well, but it would have been the upgrade that we did plus actually like some kind of like cleanup migration that would have had to write as well. So in general, with emergency upgrades that are dealing with vulnerabilities, I'm wondering what do you guys think is the best way to handle that? Because if we can't make it public beforehand, I suppose we could get it to many validators that we know are trustworthy. But I'm wondering if anybody can suggest a good framework to sort of be able to give people time to review on one hand, but then also avoid publicizing the vulnerability on the other hand.
Yeah, and to James from Lavender 5's question in chat, Jahan, keep me honest on this, but I think we didn't want to run the upgrade on provider testnet because the vulnerability would have been revealed.
Yeah, well, that's what it comes down to. I think somebody also made, I think maybe in the event column there, somebody had made a thing about having a council. And yes, I suppose we could select a number of validators. I don't think that just being the active set necessarily is a good enough criteria for somebody to get access to sensitive information about security fixes. But I mean, I'm sure we could have a council of validators who could review stuff. and then be able to maybe help other validators on the day of. But yeah, it's a really tricky problem to solve. How do you select that council, who's in it, stuff like that.
But I captured an action item that's kind of not explicit here, but to James's question, I think one thing we could have done differently, we couldn't have run this on testnet. We could have at least been more transparent about what testing did happen, because testing did happen behind the scenes just on local private testnets. Maybe we could have been more transparent about that.
And I would follow up, Ian, do you happen to have any, are you able to provide any insight into how any of the other chains that y'all validate for handle such situations?
Yeah, I'm going to be honest, in my tenure here, I have not seen an upgrade that had such little heads up that was done over the weekend. So this really felt anomalous to me, and it felt anomalous to a lot of our team. And again, if this was like a P0 like incredibly critical may lose funds upgrade, totally understandable. And obviously it's really awkward with the Neutron launch, so it's kind of like where do you squeeze that in? But yeah, I haven't had to prep an upgrade over the weekend in like months, so it's definitely not typical.
But circling back also to the, well, thank you for that, and circling back to the like security concerns and how to raise within. So I see that you've requested the 48-hour period, and so do other chains typically? Is it just pass you the binary or pass you the source code, and even in the case of emergency, still just make sure that buffer is in there? Is that kind of the supposed?
Yeah. So for
important.
Yeah, for emergency stuff, typically we have like a Slack channel that they'll just send us a message like, hey, this is really important. Like, we're targeting this if it's like an aggressive upgrade. That's one thing. Sometimes we get early access to the binary, sometimes we don't. Again, I don't think I've seen a single upgrade where the time from releasing it to actually deploying it was single-digit hours. Obviously, like those cases will come up, but that was, I guess it's still not clear to me why it had to be so tight, I guess is my main thing. I don't see that pattern being used in other protocols.
Thank you.
Yeah, in some sense, since this was not a money-losing vulnerability, we could have been more relaxed about it and taken the risk that somebody exploited it. If somebody had exploited the vulnerability, we would have had to change the upgrade. The hub would stop, and then we would also have had to take the time to write the migrations to like clean the state up again. So, and I don't know, no one would lose money, but it would be, the hub would be halted until we could get those migrations developed. And then get the upgrade out.
For sure.
So
sure.
that's and I think again it comes down to like, do we have like sort of a like a trusted council of validators who, if we know about something that we are issuing a fix for, we get to them first. I mean, like with Coinbase, I don't think you guys are going to be hacking the hub. So we could send it to you earlier. Do we want to send it to everybody who happens to be in the hub's active set? We don't know who they are. That may not be as easy of a choice. So, yeah.
Okay. I'm going to write two things down. One is I think we should asynchronously afterwards explore the idea of a trusted set of folks who could test emergency upgrade binaries. But I think separately, it sounds like there's a desire in this room for more transparency into what actually happened and what decisions were made. So I think there's value in this group getting together, just publishing a pretty high level, almost like an incident report. Like we treat it like a post-mortem or something, even though there was no actual outage. But I think the language of that might be helpful.
Yeah, I have something. I don't think we've published it, but I have something we can that I wrote about it already. But yeah, I guess we can go over that later.
Yeah, let's figure out how to share a version of that. We are pretty over time for the retro, so let's wrap up by talking about comms. There's a cluster of green that says that the sentiments here around like communication was really good. There is also one thing in the invent column about creating a Telegram announcements group. So I'm just going to open the floor for a few minutes to talk about anything related to communications, anything you felt went well, anything that could have gone differently, to anyone who wants to come off of mute.
We'll just give a quick shout out and saying that a lot of the team members were really available when we reached out over Discord. So I really appreciate that was something we got. Other protocols are not like that. You often like ask for help and you just get ignored. So I really appreciate the whole team here.
Hey, thanks for that. And yeah, likewise, we very much appreciate all of the validators for being available on such short notice.
Cool. There were a couple of things we didn't talk about, but if we need to have follow-up conversations, we'll reach out to you. Thank you, everyone, for including your company name and for sharing your thoughts with us. This is really, really helpful. Awesome. Retro done. Over to you, Abra.
Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for participating. We hope that we're going to be able to make big improvements into our processes based on this feedback. And so really appreciate you all making the time to be here today and to share that, especially Ian and Nix. Thanks for coming on the stage and chatting with us. And we still do have another point of this call. Let me pull that agenda back up. And we now want to talk a little bit about, I'll pass it back to Dante and Millen, or actually to any validators in general. If you have any general questions about running nodes or consumer chains or anything like that, please write them in the chat. And we have both Dante and Millen here to either field those questions or just note them down and follow up on them. So once again, if you have any questions about the emergency upgrade process, running consumer chain nodes, existing documentation, or anything along those lines or within that area, please feel free to either come on the stage and ask those questions or to write them in the chat. I know there was a question earlier about consumer chain, about key assignment. Does everyone feel like the key assignment issue is more clear now? Thanks, Freak12 No, yeah, appreciate that feedback about planning for a bit longer for these type of things, especially as we still have some sections to get to. Okay, so I see some folks typing.
Longer retros. And maybe not so long retros. I think this is something that we should do more often. Also, the frequency. It would be great to understand how often you guys are willing to kind of attend these things and give us feedback, because that's kind of important too.
Yeah. So +1 there, Millen, and yeah, we should follow up with everyone as well after the call to figure out a cadence that works there. Does anyone? So I see Nix. I also noticed you, or at least Strangelove, had some comments in the retro document about all changes going through Gov. Does anyone want to take a moment to chat about that? Or all Genesis changes going through Gov?
I have one comment that I guess may side rail this a little bit. But kind of the way this was pushed out with like the urgency and you kind of don't get access to the binary and just kind of hurry up and swap. There was like a non-zero percentage worry in my eyes that what if this was like a malicious attack on the network? Obviously, I had enough like social consensus where I felt okay about it, but in general, if you're just trying to rush a binary without showing it to people, that is a worry where I'm like, okay, can I trust this? So I suppose like on-chain governance would help that, but again, for emergency stuff, I don't know if there's an alternative. Just bringing up one of my concerns.
Yeah, I think the validator council thing could help. Of course, then you're sort of picking validators to be, you know, somewhat privileged. But I guess at least it would allay that kind of concern.
Okay, and I don't see too many questions coming in here in regards to just general operational stuff or stuff related to the upgrade. If any of you do have questions about that, Dante or Milan, would you like to just provide some more context about how to get answers for those kind of questions? Just so if anyone has anything async, they could take it offline and then contact via those methods.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, like I mentioned, most of the work we do at Hi-Fi, a lot of it revolves around testnets. So if you want to come by on the in the Discord channel, under the testnets category, there's a Cosmos Hub testnet channel and a replicated security testnet channel, which is the more active one right now. We do monitor that fairly frequently. So if you want to come say hi or have any questions about joining the testnet in particular, yeah, feel free to come by and a lot of the questions and issues that were surfaced prior to the mainnet launch of Neutron, we found them through the testnet. So it's a very like active place to be. So yeah, come by if you want.
Ali has a question on, can you give advice on how to be more fluent on the updates and how not to miss update news? So I think number one is kind of be on this Discord channel, Cosmos Hub Validators Verified, and that will also get you on the mailing list. And once you're on the mailing list, when we do have an update, we're going to send out a mailing list for that, an email shot for that. We do have one-to-one Telegram channels with a number of validators, not with everybody, but we want to extend that outreach to everybody if we can, but sometimes it's a bit difficult. And we also have a suggestion on having like an announcements Telegram channel, so that's maybe something we can take a look at putting in place soon. Ian, I think you should be, but I will check after the call to make sure that you are on the mailing list.
Awesome. Thank you, Milan, and thank you, Ali and Ian, for your questions. We'll follow up. Yeah, like Milan said, we'll follow up right after this about that and make sure that all of your contact info is in the right place. We add you to the mail. So I see that Ali just asked how to be on the mailing list. We can add you to it as soon as we get the relevant contact information. And one more important point here, Jahan, do you want to take a moment to describe and talk about the upcoming upgrade pipeline and maybe get some feedback on that?
Yeah, so this is kind of a tough one. This has been we've had to think pretty hard about this. There is a vulnerability currently on the Cosmos Hub. It is public. I think many people don't know about it. It's not an especially bad vulnerability, but it is a money-losing vulnerability. Last Thursday, I think, someone from Secret Network reported this in a public pull request to Cosmos SDK. It is an issue with fee grant. And fee grant, if you don't know, I don't think it's very widely used, but it's a feature in the Cosmos SDK which allows people to give like allowances to other accounts to use their money for fees. So I guess the idea is you could have a wallet that you just use to vote on props with. It doesn't have any money in it, and then your main wallet gives it a fee grant to pay the fees to vote on the props. That's one of the examples they give in the docs. And the bug that currently is live on the hub and any other chain running 45.15, which is a lot of chains, is that the allowance thing doesn't work. So you could give somebody the grant to use your money for fees, and you might have said, hey, you can only use this much, and they can actually use your entire account balance for fees if they wanted to. And I don't know if they could steal the money. I guess if they ran a validator themselves, like a small validator or something to do the attack, they could steal the money. In theory, I don't think that's an issue, but at least they could waste all your money. So that vulnerability is live right now. The SDK team pushed a patch like last Friday to 45.16. And also they looked into which accounts would be affected by this on the hub. There are 3 accounts that could be affected by this on the hub. And they are, I think it's, I don't think there's only 3 accounts using fee grant, but these, for whatever reason, are affected by the specific bug. And they have a combined total of like $50,000 worth of atoms. So that's the money at risk. So we've kind of been trying to think about how to deal with this appropriately. We don't want to be running a vulnerability live. At the same time, the loss is pretty bounded. Also, due to the nature of it, it's not like anybody can come in and steal that money. They have to actually, know. There has to be the person that they gave the fee grant to, right? So I'm not exactly sure in what context these fee grants were made and what they're for. If it's people's own wallets or whatever, then obviously the risk is very low, but we just don't know that. And obviously there's no way to just contact them. So that's the situation. Dealing with this, there are like 3 different ways that we could deal with this. The first way is we do another emergency upgrade next Wednesday. And I don't know how you guys would feel about that, obviously. That'd be more work for validators and stuff. Plus it is already public. It's the pull request is on the SDK repo. There's been releases made fixing it. The second way we could deal with it is we could make right now we could put out a governance proposal for voting on the upgrade. And maybe we don't have to call attention to the vulnerability in that. Maybe it's better not to. Just say we're bumping to 45.16 or whatever, a routine upgrade. And then it would all be going, the normal way, the governance way. That would be what would, obviously be preferred, I think, by most validators. The third way, we haven't really looked into this, but potentially we could do like a soft upgrade where it doesn't have to be coordinated. So it's not like an emergency upgrade where you sort of stop validators from proposing transactions that take advantage of this thing. But I don't know if that'd be very effective because obviously you're not going to get every validator. There's going to be small validators who never adopt it, and then the attacker could just wait for them to propose to get the transaction. So I think that third one actually doesn't make sense. So it's basically between do we do an emergency upgrade as soon as possible and say we never want to risk any funds, or do we say it's not that bad and it's not that huge amount of money. And so we're going to have a governance upgrade. It's a really tough choice. So I'm wondering if anybody has any feedback on that.
It seems like the loss is bounded. I'm not sure an emergency upgrade is warranted. I think the governance approach would be preferred by many.
Yeah.
I don't know how others feel about it, but I absolutely see how it's something you want to get patched.
I suppose if somebody did lose money through this, perhaps they could go to the community pool and get reimbursed. It would $50,000 may not be a lot in the grand scheme of all the money that's on the hub, but it would suck, for somebody to lose that money. But yeah, I think the real thing about it is that nobody can just go and steal it. It actually has to be a specific account that they fee granted. So it's kind of, it's likely to be their own wallet or something.
Does anyone else have comments or feedback about these options available for the upgrade? Once again, there's 1, which is the emergency upgrade on Wednesday, 2, which would be a governance upgrade, which includes very little context about the vulnerability, obviously, and 3 would be what's being termed as a soft upgrade, which would be a patch, and it would just prevent validators from submitting this type of transaction. And Jahan, the option number 3, would that be state breaking, and then what would be involved in this soft upgrade?
No, that would be the whole thing. That would be designed not to be state breaking. I honestly, maybe we should take 3 off the list. I don't know if it would really work that well. Because as long as one validator was not upgraded to that soft upgrade, by soft I mean non-state breaking, non-consensus breaking. As long as you had one validator not upgraded, the attack would still be possible. So I think it's actually not really going to work, to be honest. So let's just keep it to 1 and 2. Yeah, it's a good question, Eddie B, on the submitting of the vulns. It's not really in our stuff, in our repo and stuff. It's in the Cosmos SDK. So, and also, just like I said before, every SDK 45 chain, which I believe is the majority of Cosmos chains right now, is affected by this. I did feel like it was definitely handled in a pretty cavalier manner. Maybe there's something I don't know about. I don't want to say that somebody did something wrong. Also, maybe because it's just not that severe. But yeah, Dragon Barrier was obviously handled in a much more secretive way. It was much more serious.
And I can follow up with you, Eddie, about and actually follow up with everyone here. Yeah. So Milan actually just said there is a bounty program in place. Check the security.md in the repos. And then as well, I know that on the ICF's end, we should have in Q2 or Q3 like a new program being put in place for improved coordination and just general operational things around improving security processes and coordination and operational things around it.
Jose CT Stakely. We don't have that. That's on Osmosis, right? Maybe we should look into getting that from them and putting into our code, because that does seem very useful for this kind of thing.
Okay, and I see Shapeshift actually did recommend option number 1. So just in the interest of time, and since we have 1 minute until this meeting was scheduled to end, we'll go ahead. If anyone else has any feedback there, please submit it. And then Jahan, once a decision is reached within the team, please go ahead. Yeah, then we'll communicate that across all of the channels and get back to everyone about that. So, okay, in that case, we do have the final point is just a quick assessment and final thoughts about this call. You don't have to stick around for that if you wouldn't like to, but we'd love to hear what you're thinking about how this call went, how often you'd like to see this call, and a call like this, and any recommendations for facilitating or running these calls that would make your experience participating in them better than it was. So if you have any such recommendations, please type them in the chat or just feel free to come on the stage and let us know. Yep, thanks, Ian. Really appreciate your feedback and have a great rest of your day. And many thanks to your team as well for participating in the emergency upgrade, even though it was last minute. And Freak12 Techno says that we should have an assessment. We should follow up about this retro and see if things have gotten better. To follow up on that, Freak12 Techno, how often would you like to see this type of call? Just a gathering of validators and talking about processes that are retro. Okay, so once every 2 weeks, once a month. Appreciate that. I also see some thumbs up. Okay, so if anybody has any final feedback, now's the time to send it, and we'll go ahead and close out here. Does anyone have any closing words?
Yeah, thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming.
+1. Thank you so much, everyone. Glad to hear you found it helpful. And we'll follow up with both feedback about any of these action items and takeaways, as well as information about the emergency about the upgrade pipeline, and if anything's coming down the line there, and if so, how. So thank you all so much for your attendance, for your participation, and yeah, we're very grateful to have this opportunity to interface with all of you, and looking forward to keeping it going. So take care, everyone. Have a great rest of your day or evening.